from what you say in the book, various quotes in the book, I mean, one here which is, "This is the moment when European ruling elites are seeking to destroy the identity of every European nation." How long have you got, people who are opposed to Maastricht, got to change things?
Right. I'm pro-European. I fought for a Europe of nations, based on its nations. And it's all changed. The Europe of Maastricht is a Europe which destroys nations, destroys sovereignty. And up till now, up until the last few weeks, the debate has been, in code words, subterfuge, without anybody understanding what's happening. And all of a sudden, and I'm delighted by this, under the German presidency, we now at last have the true facts. No longer any subterfuge.
Right, so while the German presidency has been bad news from your point of view, it's clarified the issues.
Yes, and I want to just quote, because it's official. I'll just give you some quotes. The Kohl's ruling party, the Christian Democrats, came out with their program, Perspectives for Europe. And they make their position quite clear. They say they want a single state, not a federation of nations. They want a European Parliament like a national European Parliament, like any one, which what they call is a genuine lawmaking body. They want to convert the European Council into a Senate to be a second chamber of that Parliament. They want the Brussels Commission to become the government of Europe. So what they want, is quite clear, straightforward, is one state, one parliament, one government. In other words, the elimination of the sovereignty of the nations of Europe. And they go on. They say it is essential that no country should be allowed to use its right of veto to block the efforts of other countries to deepen integration, end of quote. That means that Britain would lose its right of veto. That means that what happens thereafter can happen against the will of each nation. It's again confirmation of loss of sovereignty. But I must just, if I may continue these quotes, because it'll set the basis, but not too many.
Just a couple more.
Yes, a couple more I give you. One, and I'm quoting again, from their report, "The notion of the unsurrenderable sovereignty of the nation state still carries weight, although," I'm quoting, "this sovereignty has long since become an empty shell." In other words, they're telling us, we've lost our sovereignty. We didn't know it. You didn't know it. The people didn't know it. But we've lost it. They've just affirmed it. And it was done by stealth, because if you remember, European Monetary Union was the whole idea of a single currency. It was put forward as an economic tool, not a political tool. But now they admit that that's not the case. It was just a disguise. Mr. Karl Lammers, who was the main advisor, this is my last quote, a great advisor to Kohl, says monetary union, and I'm quoting, is of course the highest and purest form of integration. Through it, national sovereignty would be transferred to a European body in which experts not bound by instructions from their national governments would take decisions by majority vote. To put it as succinctly as possible, monetary union is part, indeed an essential part of political union. So we've got it clear.
Right. That's what they say. That's what they say they want. I mean, I don't know. What is it that you want then? What do you think Britain should want instead of that? I mean, we can't overturn Maastricht as if it never happened, can we?
Oh, I mean, what we can do is maintain our right of veto to ensure that a single unitary state doesn't exist. There are two now visions. There's the German vision, which is backed by the socialists and the Christian Democrats, including most of the conservative MEPs in the European Parliament. And there is the other vision, which is the vision of the Europe of nations, which is a family of nations where we group together only those things that are better done centrally than done nationally, where basically the sovereignty of each nation is maintained. Those are the two visions. And it is the single most important decision a nation can make, giving up its sovereignty, eliminating its character, national character, its culture, its identity. And you realize that people are not being offered a vote by any of the political parties, a referendum, on giving up sovereignty. This is a thing for which people were willing to die.
But we haven't lost We haven't lost our sovereignty yet, have we?
Well, according to...
Yeah, but
empty shell is what he calls it.
Yes, but we can dispute that. We haven't officially handed over our sovereignty.
We still got the
now.
right of veto, but as we are going now, we are moving towards that ultimate and absolute loss of sovereignty.
When would that come? When exactly would that
Well,
be?
it's a progressive procedure, but 1996 is the final one. Now, we've got to have, it is absolutely vital that people be allowed to vote for or against it. I mean, what I am campaigning for is the right to vote. If you are for a single unitary state of Europe, you should want a referendum so as to render legitimate the decision to eliminate the sovereignty.
It looks as though Douglas Hurd here is hinting that there may be a referendum in this country.
Well,
but would you ever be able to get one, though, in France? Would you ever be able to get one in Germany? Because you've got to, you've got to have them everywhere for it to be any good, haven't you?
Firstly, if you get it in one country, it's okay. But you had, in fact, 3 referenda: France, Ireland, and Denmark. France voted yes, just. Denmark voted no, and they were told, keep voting until you say yes. But the other 9 countries did not have one. As for Douglas Hurd's remark, where they've refused it consistently, what did he say? He says it's a great mistake to say never. That's all he said. On top of that, he said it should be decided by Parliament.
That's very outspoken.
Very outspoken, very outspoken. But now let me tell you this. This is, I think, the important point. Polls show that the overwhelming majority of the British people want a referendum. It's not left or right, this issue. It's yes or no. It's gone way above the yes or right or left split. It's not just the people who are against Maastricht who want a referendum. Everybody should want the right to vote on so important a decision, so as to make it legitimate. And I've had letters, hundreds of letters, from people from all walks of life, from all over the country, asking what they can do. How can they force the vote? How can they help? And it's clear that the people have the right to vote, and they don't know it. They can force the referendum. They can bust the logjam of the politicians. They can go over the politicians' head to the people, even if the politicians try to stop it. And I'll tell you how. They can form, and that's what they want to do, a lot of people, a political party, the purpose of which is only one item, to have a referendum. It would be a one-item agenda. The party would be launched, and it would exist for 30 days. It would have a commitment that it would only introduce one piece of legislation, that part which is necessary to have a referendum. The day after the referendum, it would resign. And there would be, as I say, non-partisan. There would be a candidate in each constituency. Now, what I want to make clear to these people who've written to me on this program, because you kindly invited me, is if they want to do that, I will help them. I will guarantee that they have the infrastructure to put forward one candidate in each constituency. And I will guarantee that that party will be funded as well as any other political party to be able to fight that campaign, have a 30-day life, put through the referendum, and then resign. And then they can be back to politics as usual. But the referendum must be binding. The question must be crystal clear, no longer any fudging as we've got used to over the years. It must be absolutely irreversible.
And one of the parties spent $7 million at the last election. You'd be prepared to spend that sort of money?
Well, I'll top up what I mean, there's a lot of people out there who want to give support. Some are rich, some are poor. Each one will be able to give money according to their own requirements. But I will top up and make certain that the party is fully funded to be able to fight an election.
Well, this is a fascinating thought. You have a party formed for this one purpose, and then after 30 days, when it resigns again, having done the one thing that it was there to do, then you have another general election, I suppose.
That's correct. Another general election has been there, but there's a binding one. And to make it clear, the party should be called the referendum-only party, so as to make it absolutely clear it only has one item on its agenda. This is the way whereby the people, the electorate, who want, in their overwhelming majority, want a referendum, can force the referendum, and that the politicians who have systematically tried to block it, who, despite the opinion polls showing a 70, 75, 80% desire for a referendum, have said no because they know they'd lose it, and who have stuck together with the other politicians for reasons which absolutely baffle me, but they have. That's the way of being able to put those politicians in their place. They are there to serve the nation. They're not there to dominate it and not there to eliminate it.
And what is it about the sovereignty issue that makes it this important?
Well, can there be anything more important than sovereignty of a nation? What we're talking about, what Maastricht is talking about, what I read to you from the German document, which is backed by the Belgians, which is backed by Delors, which, as I said before, is backed by most of the conservative MEPs, is a system whereby you would be creating a merged Europe with one government, one state, one parliament, which would eliminate the power of the national parliament. The government would become like a local council. 80% of the laws, according to Mr. Delors, would come from the center. In other words, it would be one populated space, one huge artificial state, called the artificial state of Europe, or some, no doubt, better name. But that's what it would be. It would eliminate the identity, the culture, the heritage, the sovereignty of each nation.
And what would be the question you think that, Jimmy, that a referendum should ask? I mean, obviously, you can load it one way or the other.
That's why I said
obviously.
The question has to be crystal clear. And what you would need is you'd have to create a panel which would have to be properly weighted of people who one can respect, who can work on that question and put it forward. I'm seeking zero sort of political career. I am just infuriated that the politicians think that they can eliminate nations by bureaucratic diktat without asking people. What could not be done with cannons can now be done by bureaucratic directive. I've had enough of that. And that is why I formed I'm half French, half English, as you know.
Yeah.
I formed a party in France. We had a big electoral success. I'm currently president of one of the 9 political groups in Europe fighting for this. And I'm just going to do whatever it takes, not to ensure that my point of view gets across, but to ensure that people have the right to vote on their own destiny. And it's not just a bunch of very second-rate people who are the politicians in Europe at the moment, who can impose it on the majority.
And in terms of support, you'll back it financially, as indeed you've been backing the Eurosceptics financially already, haven't you?
I've done so, but this is a much bigger initiative. We will, if necessary, form a party to do so. And I hope it won't be necessary. I hope that the very fact that they can be 100%, as you know, I don't bluff, they can be 100% certain that if there's not a formal, unequivocal commitment that a new party will be formed which will put forward one candidate in each constituency in Britain and which will be fully funded. That they can be certain of. Now, that might lead them to stop this fudging, these extraordinary never say never, or whatever Mr. Hurd say, and this sort of stuff, and come out and say this is a decision the people must have the right to vote on. And if they do that, I will applaud. And of course we won't need to do anything. And that'll be wonderful, that'll be the best of all results. But if they don't, if they continue fudging, if they continue acting with the arrogance and petulance and anti-democratic spirit in which they're acting now, then they will have to face candidates in each constituency.
And in fact, what would you advise your Eurosceptic colleagues in the House of Commons to do tomorrow? On the one hand, they could vote against the government. On the other hand, that would mean you'd have a Labour government which would be less sceptical than the Tory government. What do they do on the horns of that dilemma, your colleagues?
What it does is, I mean, they know their business better than I do. So I don't know the tactics of the House of Commons. All I know is this changes things. Because if there's an election tomorrow, if the government is pulled down tomorrow or in 6 months or in a year, there will be an extra party, a pro-referendum, a party with a one-item agenda. And every party will have to take that into account, because it is not a left-right issue. In the House of in the European Parliament, sometimes I went up to vote the other day, and there were a couple of fellows who came up to me as though they were in the French Resistance. They said they were English, they were socialists, and they said, "You know, we're anti-Maastricht." They didn't dare say it. They're like resistance fighters. Today, if you say the truth, you're persecuted. Look at the way that Mr. Major and his friends have been acting in the last few days. They've been persecuting those who are fighting to protect the sovereignty and continuation of their own nation. Unbelievable.
Jimmy, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. there the possible prospect of a new party at the next election. And now we switch to the subject of Labour. Back in July, Margaret Beckett was acting leader of the Labour Party, and hoping to win the leadership contest. Well, she didn't, but far from creeping away into a corner, she pledged her loyalty to Tony Blair and was given the health portfolio. Health has proved a political minefield for both parties in recent years.
Over the past decade, the government has introduced a succession of health service reforms most bitterly opposed by the profession.